we get started. So I want to welcome everyone here today for this great event, and I want to thank Pepperdine University and all the panelists who volunteered their gracious time to be a part of us. And also note that Pepperdine is celebrating 25 years of its, the anniversary for 25 years of its public policy program. We're also here because on October 29th, we will mark the 20th anniversary of the passage of the Help America Vote Act. The bill was one of the most recent examples of bipartisan cooperation in election space and serves as a reminder that the government leaders can come together and pass significant legislation. The high level of bipartisan consensus is one to note. In Congress, HAVA passed with the support of 92 senators and 357 House members. That lesson is as important today as it was in 2002 because of threats, foreign and domestic, that face our nation's infrastructure and officials in 2022. While disinformation campaigns in the U.S. election certainly exist prior to 2016, the threat of foreign interference reached new heights that year. 6 years later, the elections community and all levels of government remain on high alert for nefarious foreign actors, as well as combating mis, dis, and malinformation from foreign and domestic sources. The EAC, which was established by the Help America Vote Act, has been an essential partner to state and local governments in combating these threats and ensuring voters that they can safely cast their votes that will be counted. Beyond the important function of protecting our democratic system, the EAC has shown over 20 years that it serves as a critical role in U.S. elections. This year will be the 10th iteration of the Election Administration and Voting Survey, or EVES, which is an important and the most comprehensive source of state and local data about election administration in the United States. To date, the EAC has distributed over $4 billion in HAVA funds to state and local election offices and is currently managing the distribution and oversight of $805 million in HAVA election security funds and $400 million in CARES Act funds. Since filling all 4 commissioner seats in early 2019 and throughout steady budget increases, the agency has appropriately grown in both size and scope of work. In the past year, the EAC has implemented an enhanced Clearinghouse division made up of subject matter experts who have specialized knowledge in election law, audits, Native American voting tribal experiences, and other critical areas of election administration. We have experts dedicated to voting and accessibility, a critical part of the EAC's mission and part of the agency's efforts of to help election officials better serve people with disabilities. We have been integral members of the election infrastructure subsector that helps secure our voting systems. Key to this mission was the adoption of the newish version of the Voluntary Voting System Guidelines in early 2021. This is the most significant update of the federal standards for voting technology since VVSG 1.0 was adopted almost 15 years ago. The EAC has also responded quickly to challenges faced by the COVID pandemic. As the 2020 primary season was in full swing, the EAC chaired the Election Infrastructure Government and Subsector Councils Working Group to provide guidance to state and local election officials to administer secure elections in the light of the pandemic. This growth is a testament to the persistence of the agency's dedicated staff amid some very challenging periods, as well as the continued confidence of the elections community, and it shows the necessity of our agency. The bulk of my professional career has also revolved around HAVA. Marking 20 years remains important to me. During the legislative process, I help advocate for key pieces of the legislation from a national security organization. and as Elections Counsel on the Committee on House Administration, I help lead oversight of the EAC and guide members on election-related agency matters. As an EAC Commissioner and current Chair during the 20th HAVA anniversary year, I'm proud to look back on all the agency has accomplished while staying focused on what the work remains ahead of us. With the general election on the horizon, amplifying trusted sources of information is critical, especially as the rhetoric and intention increases. I hope today's discussion will add to the discourse around confidence in elections and to highlight the sources of trusted information on the wide range of elections issues. Today, you'll hear from other election officials and experts who will talk about the challenges faced in the current landscape and the ever-present threats of mis and disinformation, the security of election technology, and officials and elections funding. We'll close today's discussion about the future of elections and what we'll be saying about HAVA in the next 20 years. I would also like to say thank you again to our generous hosts at Pepperdine University's School of Public Policy, and to all the panelists who volunteered their time here today. And now I'd like to introduce Dean of Pepperdine's Public School of Public. I almost got through it. And no coughing. So I'd like to now introduce the Dean of Pepperdine University's School of Public Policy, Pete Peterson. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Commissioner Hicks, and to those of you who it's your first time on campus, welcome to Pepperdine, our little city on a hill here in Malibu, California. As Commissioner Hicks notes, this is actually a celebration of two anniversaries. Importantly, we will be soon approaching the 20th anniversary of HAVA. But it's also the 25th anniversary of this graduate policy school, the 25th anniversary of the School of Public Policy. And in that, we've had an opportunity to go back over many of our founding documents and to look back at the history of a program that opened its doors in the fall of 1997. And in so many ways, the alignment and set of interests around public engagement and the importance of self-governing citizenship is so closely aligned between the EAC and this particular graduate policy school. One of the phrases that we use around here is that we are about putting the public back into public policy. And unfortunately, many of these graduate policy programs have been very good at training technocrats and experts that then go out and tell the public how stupid they are. This has never been the case here at Pepperdine. And it goes straight back to our founding. One, in many ways, influenced by the late, great social scientist, Dr. James Q. Wilson. It was Wilson who came out here from Harvard because he was smart. And was involved in the founding Blue Ribbon Committee that helped design our unique Great Books curriculum and served as our Reagan professor for the last 12 years of his life. I have it on some authority that at the first meeting of that Blue Ribbon Committee back in the mid-90s that was thinking about what would make this graduate policy school different, Dr. Wilson asked a very simple but profound question. What is public policy? Now, implicit in that question is that there is a public and that there is policy that is going to either govern them or regulate them. And in asking that question, what he was begging was, what is the public's role in something called public policy? And so from that very beginning, which again helps shape the curriculum that not only understands the human dimensions of public policy, it's been a part of the programs here and my own personal professional life to look, discover, encourage, find ways for more people to be involved in the decisions that impact their everyday lives. What this means at the policy school is that we have engaged in a number of programs, events, that have focused specifically on the public's role in creating something called public policy. Before becoming the dean, I headed up something called the Davenport Institute for Public Engagement, which is one of the nation's leading think tanks and training organizations of public sector officials in designing public processes at the state and local level to engage them in public policy making. This particular experience also influenced some of the other work that we do. We are the academic partner to the International Association of Government Officials, or IGO. So we provide training for them around the year. We have trained over 4,500 local government officials in how to do and lead better public process. At the same time, we are deeply interested in civic engagement and elections as well. We've hosted conferences here on elections technology. We've hosted studies and research in those areas as well. What are the dimensions and triggers for encouraging greater civic participation? All these programs, both inside and outside the curriculum, have focused on that original question that Dr. Wilson posed in one of those first meetings at the beginning of the school's history. As I said, this is also a personal interest for me too. As some of you know, I ran a rather ill-fated campaign for Secretary of State back in 2014, in large part based on the work I had been doing at the Davenport Institute. And as I sometimes quip, I ran as a Republican here in California, which is why I'm now Dean of the Policy School. But I won't forget this one particular evening event I was speaking at up in Santa Barbara over the course of the campaign, and I was answering questions about why I was running for Secretary of State and what my interest was on these issues, and was talking about the work that our Davenport Institute had been doing and some of the other things that the School of Public Policy had been involved in. And one person asked me the question, "Now, Mr. Peterson, in running for Secretary of State, I'd like to know your position on the Arab-Israeli conflict." And I had to nicely say, "Well, I'm sorry, ma'am, but I'm not running for that Secretary of State. I'm running for a California Secretary of State." Now, within 3 weeks, a study had come out, a poll had come out from our friends at Gallup that had asked Californians if they could define the top 2 responsibilities of the California Secretary of State. And in that survey of California voters, about 3 months prior to the election in 2014, only 4% of California voters could name the top 2 responsibilities for the Secretary of State. Now, I tell those stories as a way of focusing on why we're here today. Elections seem like a simple part of democracy. But as you'll learn, and as we've been learning, it is anything but. There is technology, or can be technology involved. There are complex processes involved in counting votes and running elections. It's a very difficult job to administer elections, especially in a nation of over 300 million people, especially in a county the size of Los Angeles or the state the size of California. But this is really the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of democracy. We have got to get this right. And by getting it right, we have to get it to a place, which is the subtitle for this conference, in which we are building trust in our elections. This is fundamental to this American experiment, and why, again, we are so delighted at the School of Public Policy to be partnering with you all at the Election Assistance Commission in hosting what I hope is just the first of other opportunities to partner. It really is near and dear to who we are here at the Graduate Policy School, to not only understand the what of public policy, but also the how. And the how of public policy is how we engage, involve, and be informed by the publics we serve. So before we get into our first panel, I wanted to touch on a couple other pieces here. First, we were sent a letter by none other than former President George W. Bush to be read at the start of this event. President Bush, you know, was not only president at the time of the signing of HAVA, he signed HAVA, but at the same time he was very involved in the process of getting it passed. One that was passed, hard to believe it today, overwhelmingly by the House and Senate. I have been instructed not to alter or veer from this text in any way, shape, or form, so I will just read it as it's presented to me from George W. Bush, dated September 1st, 2022. Laura and I send our greetings to everyone marking the 20th anniversary of the Help America Vote Act. Your gathering is an important recognition that free, fair, and secure elections are a cornerstone of our democracy. We have been conducting elections in this country for more than 2 centuries. We have corrected earlier failings that disenfranchised people based on race and gender. And while there is always room for improvement, our elections have allowed citizens to peacefully hold officials accountable, to vote in new leaders, and if desired, to vote out the incumbents. The peaceful transfer of power that follows is a hallmark of our free society. I'm pleased that the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA, has contributed to our country's electoral integrity and encouraged greater involvement among our citizens. Thanks to infrastructure created by HAVA, along with the dedication of state and local officials and volunteer poll workers from our communities, Americans can and should be confident in the results of our elections. Americans must never take for granted the blessings of liberty or the privilege of accountable government. Thank you for remembering the commitment that makes them possible, and keep up your important work. So now, I would like to direct your attention to the 2 video monitors as we will hear pre-recorded keynote remarks from the Honorable Roy Blunt, U.S. Senator from Missouri, and the Honorable Amy Klobuchar, U.S. Senator from Minnesota. Please direct your attention to the video screens.
Hello to everyone attending this conference on HAVA at 20 and building trust in elections. I'd like to thank Election Assistance Commission Chairman Thomas Hicks and Dean of the Pepperdine University School of Public Policy, Pete Peterson, for holding today's important conversations on how we can work together to improve election administration and keep our elections secure. I'd also like to recognize my counterpart on the Senate Rules Committee, Ranking Member Roy Blunt, who I understand you're going to hear from shortly. As a former election official himself, Roy is dedicated to ensuring that state and local governments have the resources that they need. And we're also really good friends and have done a lot of things together heading up the Rules Committee. Some of them are small, like making sure Tammy Duckworth could bring her brand new baby onto the Senate floor. Yes, they were disallowed, even though dogs were allowed. To big things, like the inauguration this year and the investigation after the insurrection when it comes to the piece of how we needed to greatly improve security at the U.S. Senate. I'm going to miss Roy when he retires at the end of the year, but I'm glad you're going to be able to hear from him. I'd also like to thank all the election officials and workers who are on the front lines defending our democracy every single day. As we've heard all too well from election officials from Arizona to Michigan to Pennsylvania, you are literally on the front lines. So many election officials have sadly received threats and the like, from horrible threats via email or phone, to things happening in front of people's homes, to having to move their families out of their homes. And for me, what echoes in my mind is always the words from the recent testimony in front of the House January 6th Commission, where the 2 poll workers out of Georgia, mother and daughter, told their stories of how the daughter, Shay, had gained 60 pounds after being threatened and had her name put out there over false accusations of voter fraud. Or her mom, who was known as Lady Ruby, who proudly would wear a shirt that said Lady Ruby and could no longer wear it after these threats were made about her. These are real issues, and it's our job in the federal government to have your back, to uphold the principles of our democracy. This conference is particularly timely as we approach two important dates, the 2022 midterms this November and the 20th anniversary of the passage of the Help America Vote Act, also known as we know it, HAVA. In the aftermath of the 2000 election, members of Congress from both parties understood the need to restore public faith in our elections. That's why lawmakers have come together to pass the reforms in HAVA with broad bipartisan support, setting standards for voting machines, creating the Election Assistance Commission, and establishing federal grant programs for election security and administration. 2 decades later, election administrators are confronting new challenges, like the spread of misinformation and disinformation that has taken a toll on both election officials and voters. At the same time, we need to bolster our investments in election security, including cybersecurity, as intelligence officials have warned that our elections remain a target for foreign adversaries. Another major challenge, as I just mentioned, is the rise in threats and harassment of election officials from both parties, which increased in 2020 and has only continued since then. Even after 20 years, HAVA still gives us tools to meet these challenges head on, including through the EAC's resources for election administrators and the nearly $1.3 trillion in election security grants Congress has provided since 2018. That includes $400 million in 2020 as election officials rose to the challenge of holding elections in a global pandemic. I'll never forget the images early on in the pandemic during the primary of those voters in Wisconsin standing outside in the pouring rain with makeshift garbage bags to protect them and homemade masks. They did that because they wanted to vote, because they were upholding our democracy. Luckily, since then, we've learned a whole lot about how to protect our public health while voting. That's what those grants were all about. Thanks to the hard work we all did together, more Americans voted than ever before in the middle of a public health crisis in what the Department of Homeland Security declared the most secure election in our history. We did some of that, but most of it you did, and I thank you so much. Earlier this year, Senator Blunt and I successfully worked with the EAC to make sure election officials are able to use this funding for critical security services for our election officials and workers. We owe it to our election workers to make sure they can do their jobs free from intimidation or improper influence. Of course, there's still more we need to do to strengthen our elections. That's why I'm leading legislation to provide a reliable stream of federal funding to state and local election administrators and to strengthen protections for election workers against threats and harassment. And as voters in many states continue to confront laws making it harder to vote, I will continue to push the basic federal standards to make sure all Americans can vote in the way that it works best for them. Finally, I want to mention one area where we're seeing exciting bipartisan progress, the Electoral Count Act. I've been working with Senator Blunt and the bipartisan group convened by Senators Collins and Manchin to update this antiquated law and bring needed clarity to our presidential elections. Senator Blunt and I just chaired a hearing together on this bill. It couldn't have gone better with Democratic and Republican witnesses voicing their support for the bill, suggesting some concrete and constructive changes, which I hope they'll be able to do together. And as we work with the House to get this done by the end of the year, I hope this will be a model of how we can once again go back to working on election reform on a bipartisan basis. It couldn't be more important to update our laws, to make it easier to vote, and to get you the funding and protections that you need. I'd like to close by thanking the election officials and experts here today for your efforts to make our democracy work better for every American. I'm proud to be your partner in Washington, pushing for the election funding and resources you need to bolster election security, protect election workers, and ensure our elections remain fair and free. You are the bulwark of all of that, and I don't think people thank you enough. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
It's great to be with you. I want to thank the Election Assistance Commission for inviting me to speak at this important event celebrating 20 years of the Help America Vote Act. Would have been better if I could have figured out how to be right there at Pepperdine with you, one of the prettiest spots you could possibly have this conference. But it's an important time to think about what we did 20 years ago when in 2002 the Help America Vote Act was passed. It's an example of the type of good legislation that can come as a result of bipartisan negotiation and compromise. Following the 2000 election, Congress came together to pass this bill that helped modernize our elections and give states the tools to continue to innovate. You know, when I came to Congress in 1997, it had just been a few years before that I'd been the Secretary of State in our state, the chief election official, and my first elected job as the Greene County Clerk and Chief Election Authority in Missouri's third largest county gave me a lot of experience thinking about what election officials do and how important it is they do it the right way. I know the hard work that goes into running our elections. State and local election officials are responsible for ensuring our elections are run effectively, and along with that, doing everything they can to be sure that people have confidence in the results of what happened on Election Day and before. For more than 200 years, states have been responsible for elections, and state and local election officials work tirelessly. It's a year-round job, often managing multiple elections in a year. Some of the elections, like the local school board election and other things, may be in many ways more complicated than the elections where everybody's voting on the same thing. But dealing with those complicated issues, meeting all the difficult logistical challenges that elections bring, is an incredibly important part of what you do. It takes planning, it takes hard work, and we have public servants in our country like you who are willing to do that. You know, our role in Congress is to support states in their administration of elections and give them the help they need to innovate and serve the needs of their citizens. This type of work can be done in a bipartisan manner, and historically that's exactly what the Congress has done, just like you administer elections in a bipartisan way. A key feature of the Help America Vote Act is that it recognizes that the diversity of our election system is one of the strengths of our election system. And while Congress created some guidelines for states to follow in their federal elections 20 years ago and has done a few things since, it's largely stayed out of the way, providing funding for states, but giving them the freedom to use the funds to craft their laws and administer elections in the ways they see are best ways to serve their citizens in their state, and sometimes even in their community when you have some flexibility within a state. Over the past few years, Congress has dramatically increased the support we give states to help improve the ability of local election officials to administer elections. In the past 5 years, Congress has provided nearly $1.3 billion to help states upgrade antiquated systems, increase their cybersecurity, and respond to COVID-19 related challenges. The Election Assistance Commission plays a vital role and provides an invaluable resource to states, ensuring election officials have the necessary information and resources they need to administer secure and successful elections. I applaud the Commission for the work they do and have done for the past 20 years, and I applaud those of you who are the partners that the Commission needs, and frankly, the reliable partners that Congress needs. As we celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Help America Vote Act and enter another general election cycle, we have to continue to engage with states and election officials to better understand and meet their needs. As we all know, cybersecurity remains a top concern for election officials across the country, as well as ensuring that Americans have confidence in their elections. Because of this, one of the things I often hear from both our state election officials and local officials is they'd like to have increased and improved information sharing. We're advocating for that. As states administer elections, access to more and better information will help ensure elections continue to run safely and smoothly. Supporting election officials by ensuring they have the best, most up-to-date information can help instill confidence in the results of our elections. States also need to continue the important work of recruiting, retaining, training poll workers. This has gotten harder to do as people have begun to lose confidence in the system, and as others have talked about what could happen on election day that frankly doesn't happen. There are reasons that we have the system set up the way it's set up. I used to tell election workers when I was a county official and doing election training, there are two of you assigned to every job for two reasons. One is you're supposed to watch each other. The other is you're supposed to protect each other by watching each other. Nobody is well served by somebody saying, well, I don't feel very well, I'm going to walk away for a few minutes. That's not the kind of thing that we can let happen, because everybody in this election process has a vested interest in people believing that everything was fair and the results of the election process are a reflection of what people intended to do. Election officials have a difficult job. We rely on you all the time to ensure our elections are fair, secure, and accessible. Through the Help America Vote Act, Congress can continue to work together in a bipartisan way to ensure election officials have the resources, the information, and the federal support they need to be successful. I look forward to continue to work with my colleague, Chairwoman Klobuchar, on the Rules Committee for the next 4 months now as I end my congressional career. But I look forward to being able to rely on you and our election process to continue to work to be sure that people have confidence in the system and that they have every reason to have that confidence. Thanks for the invitation to speak to you today, and thank you for all the great work you continue to do to ensure our election system remains strong.
Well, thank you very much, Senators. We are going to get underway here with our agenda.